Okay.
If you are prepared, you can start.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for having me. I always enjoy coming to my alma mater and coming back. You said that we've been working for 15 years, I will say almost 20 now. In 2005, I was like doing my master and my specialization degree. So yeah, now a couple of years after that, we start collaborating with Columbia University. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to have the opportunity to share some of my perspectives on economics and business education. As you mentioned, I am a PhD candidate in the Learning, Design, and Technology program in Penn State. And although I have been a professor on finance and strategy for almost 15 years, my PhD journey has showed me interesting opportunities to improve the practice that we are having in higher education institutions. So the title of my presentation here, From Life Experience to Learning, tries to introduce you to this idea of how are we learning and how can we use the life experiences of individuals and incorporate those life experiences in how we learn, and especially how we learn in higher education institutions, that is undergrad or in graduate programs that are related to economics and business. Part of what I am going to present here is the result of a research project that I developed with my advisor, Dr. Priya Sharma, supported by the Center for Financial Education and Capability from BBVA in 2022. And I am sorry for the typo. This is not 2023, this is 2024 in my title. So a little bit about me, as I mentioned, and Mariano said, I am a PhD candidate here in Penn State. This is my website if you want to learn more about my trajectory and some of these ideas that I am presenting in today's presentation. Just go to this URL. Here you can see my 2 emails, and I have some information available also. And I'd be happy to connect with you and to tell you more about this research, but also if you are interested in coming to the US to study your graduate program, or you are curious about how it is to be an international student in the US or anything else, I will be happy to connect with you. So in preparation for this talk, I was looking for information in several sources, and I came through the IMF, to the International Monetary Fund website, because Angus Deaton, Nobel Prize of Economics in 2015, published an interesting blog entry that we will be discussing soon. But one of the, when I get into the IMF blog page or website, I found this interesting phrase or sentence from an author that is presenting an article about transforming economics teaching. So when I read this, I say, okay, this is something interesting to start my talk, because when they say that an expanded view of economics makes it relevant to important real-life problems that go well beyond the economist's traditional concern with efficiency, what I am reading here is that we need to, or we will benefit from transforming or adopting new perspectives related to economics education. What specific ideas are they trying to convey here? Is the necessity of using utilizing real life problems when we teach about business and economics in general. So this is not only one sentence or one interview that was presented in the IMF blog. They actually have, and I invite you, and if we have also professors here, it will be very interesting to go to the IMF website and look for the March 2024 issue of the Finance and Development Journal. They have several articles in which they are calling for new approaches on economics. The international, and this is curious, like if the International Monetary Fund and other institutions as the World Bank are recognizing that the ideas that have been driven economic thinking in the last 50 to 70 years are not getting us to a point when we're able to reduce poverty and inequality, we need to think differently about that. So you can see here how different titles from this journal, again, from the International Monetary Fund, talk about rethinking my economics, why and how economics must change, renewing economics, transforming economic education. So a call for change is being presented from different points, and we need to hear it. So we as economic educators and business educators need to attend that call, and that's why I think these type of reflections are interesting. And the idea of this talk is at the beginning, we will discuss precisely some of the ideas introduced by Angus Deaton in his article, Rethinking My Economics. And then I will move forward presenting you the results of the research project that my advisor and I developed in Colombia a couple of years ago. By the way, if you have questions and you want to throw them in your chat, you're welcome to do it. If you want to keep them till the end, that's also fine. And I'll be happy to also answer questions in Spanish if you prefer. So let's start reviewing some of the ideas introduced by Angus Deaton here. From all this paragraph, what I would like to highlight is the idea that he, a Nobel Prize in economics, not many years ago, is acknowledging that economics is in some disarray with our current context. He is acknowledging also here that economic scholars, especially from the global north, were not able to predict what was happening during the financial crisis in 2008 and what is happening now with all the movements that are happening in the financial markets. And especially what he highlighted in the last sentence is that we, and by we he refers to economic scholars, we understood less well than we thought, referring back to the efficacy of markets and financial markets. What is the problem here? The problem here is that these economic scholars are the ones that are leading economic thinking around the world. And if they are not able to understand the structural implications of financial markets, how are we, like regular citizens and individuals that don't have like all the knowledge and the time that they have to do research about this, how are we going to be able to understand financial markets in its depth? It's tricky and it's a complex situation, but we are living in a world where financial markets and financialization as a phenomenon is increasing their presence in our daily lives. In his blog, in his entry, Angus Deaton categorizes his thinking or his thoughts in 5 sections or in 5 categories. So I will go over this because again, I am finding very interesting that an individual like him is taking the time to reflect on some of these ideas. So let's start with the idea of power. How are we in economic education and in economics in general thinking about power? So he starts by saying that if we don't analyze power, we can't understand what inequality is, how inequality works, and how we are able to reduce inequality in modern capitalism. And why is this important? Because in several scenarios nowadays, we are seeing every time more calls to disregard the idea of power. We don't need to think about power. And what Angus Deaton is saying here, be careful. Power and power imbalances are the main cause of inequality. So we need to address them in a certain way, but we can't keep disregarding how power and the power that is embedded in the capitalistic system affects and produces, because that's the argument. The power produces inequality, and capitalism needs inequality. That's the whole idea behind this. And that he is saying this is something interesting to consider. The second category, or the second line of thought that he presents, is about philosophy. And from these points, what I would like to highlight is how the philosophy behind economics has privileged ideas like well-being being associated with money or consumption, but we don't know what matters to people. And by giving money and consumption that role, or that role of being the generator of well-being, has been one of the causes of having this excess of consumption that we are living now, and is driving our economies and our productive systems to the point that we are now, where some scholars are calling for acknowledging that we can't sustain our livelihoods if we keep our style or our lifestyles in the way that we are doing right now. So it is critical to address the call that he is presenting here, that Deaton is presenting here, where individuals matter much more than relationships between people in families or in communities in current economic thinking. So that individualistic thinking added to the idea that consumption and money produces well-being is part of what is producing the situation we're living now. What is the proposal, or what is the opposed position? Privileging communities, privileging solidarity, privileging collective thinking. But that requires some changes in the foundations of economic thinking and economic education now. The third point here is about efficiency, and I will say that by efficiency, I would like to refer better to social justice or equity issues. What he's saying here basically is the current economic thinking, and the current economic thinking is based on the idea that markets are efficient and that individuals and companies are pursuing efficiency in all their actions. The problem with that is presented in the second sentence, when he says that this idea of efficiency is producing what he calls upward redistribution. What is upward redistribution? The idea of redistribution is like, if markets are efficient, we all will benefit, because those that are generating benefits are going to distribute those benefits to the general population and to those that are like in the bottom of the pyramid, as some have called. The problem with upward redistribution is that that flow doesn't go from the top to the bottom, but goes to the bottom to the top. And the problem is that extractive markets and extractive technologies are taking wealth from the poor and transferring that wealth from the poor to the richest. So that is the opposite idea of efficiency, but that is what we are observing nowadays in our economies and in our society. So that's something that we need to address, and that's the idea of, or that's when the idea of social justice came into play, like challenging this idea of the upward redistribution. And regarding methods, this is the fourth category. When we think about the methods being used in economic thinking and in economic education, usually econometrics is the preferred method for economists. And a big amount of data are needed in order to generate knowledge in economics. However, what he is calling here is we need to think more like historians. We need to think more maybe adopting qualitative methods, maybe adopting ethnographic methods for doing research in economics. And that will help us understanding better what is happening with the individuals, and will help us to address the situations that he has been presenting in the previous slides. And finally, he titled the last category humility. And I think this is quite important for economic scholars, for business scholars, and in general for the people who is like in leadership positions, and with like having the capability or the option to make decisions that affect others. And the first sentence is amazing. Is we are often too sure that we are right, and we don't think, and we don't like to think that we might be wrong. So I will say, and I will acknowledge from this idea, economics have been recognized widely as a discipline with who is difficult to establish dialogue. Economics needs to establish more dialogue with social sciences. At the end, economics, we like it or not, is a social science by itself, but some scholars don't feel comfortable with that idea of being a social science. And social sciences are sciences related to individuals, to phenomena that need to be studied in a different way than nature sciences. So it will be good to recognize, as he said here, that there are other perspectives, and we need to learn, and that sometimes there is not only one way to resolve a problem, there are different ways to come to an end, and we need to learn how to choose between them. So having these discussions is not bad. Having the discussions between left and right ideas is not necessarily bad, and we don't need to get to that animosity and to that to that bad situations when we argue in a bad way. What we have to do instead is dialoguing and finding new meanings through dialogue. So with this introduction, and I would like to ask you to keep thinking about these 5 elements: power, philosophy, methods, humility, and efficiency or social justice. While I am presenting the results of my project, I'm now going to present or to introduce you some of the results and findings from the project that we worked. The project title was, "Do we mean the same when we talk about financial inclusion and financial literacy?" When we presented this proposal to the Center for Financial Education from BBVA, we were thinking, okay, in their call, this was 2021, maybe, yeah. We were just in the middle of the pandemic, and they made a call about financial inclusion. They made like the call was, we want to provide funds to projects interested in exploring ideas about financial inclusion and financial education. So we decided, or we thought at that point, due to my interest in financial education, that maybe we can go back and think or reflect at least like if when people from different perspectives or from different populations were asked about financial education, financial inclusion, if they had the same ideas. And we decided to talk with two specific groups here for this project. We decided to talk with rural communities and with fintech executives. Fintech at that moment was like in the racing part of the wave in Latin America, and specifically in Colombia. At that point, we had like 2,030 companies affiliated to the FinTech Association in Colombia. So that was an interesting, and it is still an interesting moment for FinTech. But at that point, it was interesting to see like what were they thinking and how different could be the approach to these topics from a rural farmer, from a farmer, a small farmer, and from the perspectives of an executive that was seated in a 20 or 30th floor in Colombia, looking at the reality through our window. That was also a good moment because in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, the Colombian government issued the National Strategy for Economic and Financial Literacy and Inclusion. Like as many other policies in Colombia, you can find them in Compass documents. So the Compass 4005 is the Compass. This is the document that presents what is the national strategy for these topics in Colombia. The discussion about this strategy started before the pandemic. In 2019, I had the chance to talk to some of these individuals working in this policy in 2019, but the process continued in 2020, and they, at the end, they issued this policy maybe the second half of 2020. So it was right in the middle of the disruption produced by the pandemic. So, but anyhow, like the objective of the policy was to integrate the financial services into daily activities of citizens and small and medium and micro enterprises to contribute to growth and financial inclusion of the country. This objective is written in the policy. So here we can see like what was the main idea, and to achieve this objective, the policy incorporated 4 specific goals. The first one was expanding the financial portfolio and improving the relevance for the people. The second one was increasing people's skills, knowledge, and trust with financial system, and specifically to reduce the use of cash and informal services use. And I'll be coming back to this in a few seconds. The third one was strengthening the digital infrastructure to increase financial inclusion. And the fourth and last one was propose the institutional governance needed to improve articulation and implementation of these strategies. So basically, the point here was we want to make people use less cash, use more financial products, and be more digital in their interactions with the financial system, which is good, some will say, but at the same time, it's not easy to achieve in a country like Colombia. So Colombia, to give you an idea, Colombia is the 5th largest economy in Latin America, and was in 2021, and at that point was like with Argentina deciding who is 4th, who is 5th, but is one of the most unequal countries in the world. The Gini index in Colombia is really high, and 39% of its population lived in poverty. The problem is even worse when we look at the rural areas, when poverty reached 45%. In these rural areas, 23%, almost 1 out of 4 Colombians live in these areas. So we can see here in these graphs provided by the World Inequality Database website, what is the difference between the income of the top 10% is the red line on the left graph, and the income of the bottom 50%. So the 10% of the country, of the people in the country, earn almost 60% of the general income, and at the same time, the bottom 50%, so half of the country, only earns or only have like 5 to 6% of national income. That's like a situation where inequality is undeniable. And in the second graph, the graph in the right talks about wealth. So one thing is income, the second talks about wealth. And the differences when we look at wealth are even wider. So the gap is even wider when we talk about wealth. So having income is not the same as having wealth, of course, but the situation that we are observing here like shows what are the differences between between the top riches and the bottom people. When we presented then like the proposal, we were okay. So this is the hypothesis that we would like to explore, or we want to observe here. So in general, like what we are saying, or what the financial and economic education policy is saying is like, if we increase financial literacy, and that financial literacy lead to an increased use of financial products, we will have higher levels of financial inclusion. And here, when we talk about financial inclusion, we need to think about fintech, because at that moment, again, as I was saying, it was not only the traditional financial system, but also new participants that were coming from the fintech industry that were providing financial services to the population. If we have more people included in the financial system, that was the general point, the productivity of these people will increase. And with an increased productivity, we will be able to observe higher rates of economic growth. That was the point. And this economic growth is leading to poverty reduction, inequality reduction, and in general, at the end, we are talking about increased financial wellness. Some scholars backed up these ideas that were embedded in the policy. We were looking to confirm or to deny like this approach, and we were based, or our concerns were based on the concerns presented by some critical scholars that raised that have presented points against the influence of financial education and neoliberal capitalism in education. So we were interested in contrasting these perspectives. For this goal, we designed a methodology where our research questions were, what are the different system actors' understanding of financial literacy and financial inclusion? And how do the different system actors assess the potential of new technologies to affect financial inclusion? We reached out to rural communities and to fintech leaders, and using qualitative techniques and some quantitative also with the preliminary survey, we approached these populations to collect data. So basically, our data collection strategies were a preliminary survey that we made based on the OECD Toolkit for Financial Literacy issued in 2021. Workshops were that we defined the content and the structure of those workshops with the gatekeepers of the communities that we were visiting, and in-depth interviews on-site and semi-structured with both rural communities and the fintech leaders. So the data collected, first, we visited 3 different communities in Colombia. In our workshops and in general, we had 41 participants in total for the rural communities, and we have 5 participants for the fintech leaders. The communities we visited in Colombia were located in the banana zone, that is like close to the north region in Colombia, close to the Atlantic Ocean, Caribbean Sea. The Magdalena Medio is the MM, is located, this group was a group of social leaders from organizations located close to a big town in the Magdalena Medio region. And the route participants were members of a farmers association. The route is an area located in the Valle del Cauca, close to Cali, close to the coffee region, to the zona cafetera. And we have all groups, participants from that zone. With this population, we were able to collect 32 survey responses. We developed 3 workshops and have 5 in-depth interviews with farmers and gatekeepers. By gatekeepers, what I'm referring to are the social leaders or those who were like in charge of calling the participants or inviting people to our activities. With the fintech leaders, we analyzed the compass. We explored the fintech companies' websites, and we reached out to using the database of one of the fintech associations in Colombia. We reached out to people, inviting them to participate in our study. So the 5 interviews that we have were 3 out of those 5 interviews were from fintech executives of companies located in Bogota. 1 of them were located in Medellin, and the 5th one was located in Tunja. Tunja is in Boyacá. Tunja is a town close to, like an hour ago from Bogota. We had only male participants from the fintech companies. That's something that it's interesting to analyze. And we have like half and half between males and females in the participants from rural communities. Using grounded theory approach and coding strategy, we came to the following findings. So in general, we categorize, or we presented like 3 big findings for this study. The first one is that financial literacy in general is defined and shaped by personal context. So it's not that there is only one way to be financial literate. There are several ways of being financial literate, and that will depends on my personal context and my personal experiences. The second one is that the traditional financial system doesn't facilitate financial inclusion, and that is something that we are not discovering. We are just confirming it through the ideas of these participants. They were traditionally from already excluded populations from the traditional financial system, people who usually don't have enough incomes, who usually have had bad experiences with the credit scores and with that have not paid their obligations on time. So they have been excluded from the traditional system because of the policies and regulations already in place. And the third finding was that technological practices limit the scope of fintech solutions, And here it is important to acknowledge not only the limitations in the individual technological practices, but also the limitations on the infrastructure available in some of these regions. Because we were talking to people located in rural areas, and when we will see that, but some of the fintech executives say like, the problem is that I have some internet coverage here in Bogota, but if I go 10 kilometers away from Bogota, the internet or the quality of the connections are completely different. So that makes us impossible to offer our services to this population. But let's talk a little bit about this. My computer is freezed out. I don't know why. We were so lucky not having technological issues, but we're having now. Give me 1 second. But well, meanwhile, okay, now it went to the end. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit more about the idea that financial literacy is defined and shaped by personal contexts. So from the workshops, and this is a picture of me working with one of these groups in a very hot place, with no air condition, but that was fine. And some of us were using masks because that was 2022. So there were like mandatory use of masks in some places. But well, there are like two important topics that we highlighted here. One is that the ideas and the notions of saving and spending depend on the family and the context. Some participant was like highlighted how in her childhood, what she heard about money was money is there to be spent. So don't waste your time saving, just spend the money that you have. And that lady was saying that she wasn't able to be consistent in implementing saving practices. And she was like attributing that situation to the messages that she was receiving during her childhood. And also another participant was reporting like in the community, the people usually, when they had like a nice business, a good business, the first thing they do was making a party, not allocating some money for the future. No, it's like making a party. It's the idea was spending. On the other side, another participant was talking about how in schools, in their grandson school, they were teaching them how to save money, actively developing strategies to motivate them to save money, and that thanks to that program, her grandson was able to buy a motorcycle, and with that motorcycle, this guy was being able to work and to generate income. So she was observing how there is a changing in the mindset, but that change in the mindset of these individuals are being produced by education, so by financial education. So at the end, financial education had a positive effect in this individual. But the second point we highlight here was that for when we ask people what was like their main concerns, they say that rebusque is, I don't know, in Argentina you said rebusque también,
Sí.
Mariano, yeah? Okay,
Sí,
so
sí.
rebusque
Yes.
was the primary strategy for financial security. They were not thinking about, okay, let's make this savings account, or let's make these other practices. No, it's just like the rebusque. The rebusque was like, yeah, like if I am able to have my daily allocation to pay for my daily expenses, that's fine. I don't need more than that. And several strategies were used for this by these ladies. So basically, one of the participants, as you can see here in the bottom, was selling cosmetic products, Jambal, Avon. I know that in Argentina, maybe you can have that. Also the multi-level sellings. So people was thinking more in finding strategies to generate more incomes, not much incomes, but that just working to generate incomes, and don't have that idea of make money work for you, invest your money, save your money, and generate dividends from your investings. But again, this is depending on the context that we were talking, and these are some specific implications for this population. Was also interesting to hear one of the fintech executives mentioning that, like in his words, if you talk to a person graduated from the best university or schools in Colombia, in 80% of the cases, they don't have idea of financial education. They don't know how to save money. So in his perspective, from this fintech executive, we need, and by we, I was referring to fintech companies, we need to provide strategies and ways for these people to do it even without knowing how to do it. So that was another interesting perspective that was presented here related to financial education. But that one of these fintech executive individuals like acknowledge that 80% of the most educated people in the country don't know anything about financial education. It's relevant and it reveals something about our society. The second point that we highlighted was that the second finding was that traditional financial system does not facilitate financial inclusion. And here, let's go back to what Angus Deaton was saying. Remember, power, philosophy, efficiency, methods, and humility. And this is something that is totally related to like the idea of the traditional financial system is a powerful system. So we need to address that idea of power in the traditional financial system, because at the end, what is happening is that those in power make the decisions for those that are like, as Paulo Freire will call them, the oppressed population. So we need to address how the power imbalances plays an interest or a critical role here in the financial in the financial lives at the end of individuals. So here again, and also going back to Deaton, is where the upward redistribution is taking place. Financial inclusion is perpetuated by unequal context and opportunities. If not only, I'm not talking only about the access to financial institutions, that is hard in these three places that we visited. In two of them, they felt that they had a good financial structure. They had a good financial structure for their needs. But in the other one, in the other place where we were there, the closest bank was 45 minutes away from that location. So that makes it impossible for these people to think about using the traditional system. There was a figure in place in Colombia at that point, the corresponsales no bancarios, where a small store could be like a provider of financial services affiliated to a big bank. But that was not working very well for some of them. And this was the pandemic. This was after the pandemic. During the pandemic, the government, I will say invited, but it could be also say like forced to wire them the transfer and the subsidies that they usually receive through these other ways. So yeah, financial exclusion is something that is related specifically to the practices of the financial system, but at the same time, historical negative perceptions of the financial system impede action from individuals. So if my parent have had a bad experience with the traditional financial system, if the bank, for example, like it happened in the 1990s, the banks took a lot of properties from individuals that weren't able to pay during the credit crisis in Colombia in the 1990s. If I had a bad perception from banks, I will not be like so willing to be to establish relationship with these institutions. So the problem with this is that if the traditional financial system doesn't work, then the informal lending or the informal practices take place, and what we call in Colombia the gota gota, or here in the US the shark loans. I don't know cómo los llaman en los pagadiarios, ¿cómo los llaman allá en Argentina, Mariana?
I don't know exactly what you are.
Well, I'm talking about.
We say gota gota, goteo is like uno a uno o despacio.
No. I'm talking about the predatory loans. Los,
Ok.
los,
Los créditos en las cuevas.
sí,
que
las
quedan en-
cuevas, eso, las cuevas pueden ser. Yeah, those credits where you pay, I don't know, 50% or, well, it is different in Argentina, of course, like with
Usura.
the rates. Yeah, but the usura, like higher than the usura, yeah. It's way higher than the usura. And with the increased risk that they are not going to collect money in a good way, but they are being violent and will threat your life. And yeah, it is, that's a problem. So in so many of these regions, these gota gota or these predatory loans or these shark loans were present, and people were willing to pay these high interest rates and willing to take these increased risks because they needed their resources. And another participant was really like critical of banks, and they charge you for depositing money, they charge you for retiring it, they charge you for everything. I don't want to give money to people who already have a lot of money. So that's part of the perceptions that are like already happening in these places. And finally, the third finding, the technological practices limit the scope of fintech solutions. So as I say, like one issue was the access to internet, the internet access that um, uh, was not the same everywhere. Like there are like strong differences between internet access in the cities and internet access in these rural areas. However, I was able to spend time with Alfredo, this farmer, this small farmer, and he was able to do most of his businesses using his phone and using WhatsApp. So I saw him like selling his products over WhatsApp, sending voice messages. Those that some of us we don't like. I don't like voice messages, but this farmer was using those voice messages and making and closing deals over WhatsApp. So that's something that definitely has had an impact, but we are still far from having the same access level in the rural areas than in urban areas. But yeah, this is and here in the bottom you can see like Cesar. Cesar was one of the fintech executives, where he said like Colombia is not well covered in general. If we go far from the capital cities, we don't have good coverage, and that makes us like unable to to uh, to generate like products or to provide services to these populations. Some conclusions, initial findings and conclusions from this. First, something interesting, when I asked the 5 fintech executives if they know about the national strategy for financial and economic education and inclusion, none of them knew anything about it. And it was issued at least 2 years before, 2 years before. So they haven't heard about it. So one interesting conclusion or one important recommendation here is policymakers need to have a closer approach to these populations. Not only, if I ask the farmers, I was expecting them not to know anything about this, but I was expecting that the fintech leaders knew something about it, because, and especially because in the policy, there are specific and clear instructions for how to promote fintech businesses. And this not to say like the perceptions from these 2 different populations were quite different. A second interesting conclusion is related to the disruption of the financial system. Many of these fintech executives were happy just introducing new technologies to their financial services and financial products. This is not real disruption, and we need to think differently about this. Being disruptive means changing the practices that the oppressive practices of the traditional financial system. If we are not happy with the poorer paying higher rates because they are riskier, we need to take a different approach. Of course, they are riskier, but if we keep charging them high interest rates they are not going to be able to come out with from their situation. A third interesting conclusion was that although some of the fintech executives were willing to support and to work for the less favored populations, the pressure from corporate headquarters and investors to achieve growth and profitability in the short term and this unstable context distract them from that like purpose, from the social purpose, and made them focused in the quick gains that they can achieve attending other populations and implementing different business practices than those that they were thinking before. And the last conclusion here is like we can't generalize. Aiming for generalization, even for groups with similar characteristics, could lead to perpetuate these unequal practices. We talked to 3 different rural communities. They were all rural communities, but they all were quite different, and their needs and expectations were totally different in general. Finally, I will like to go back to the implications of this study in terms of what Angus Deaton was telling us, again, with the categories of power, philosophy, methods, humility, and efficiency. And it is important to incorporate some of these ideas and the findings from projects like the one that we are presenting here in economic and business education to discuss how power plays a critical role in generating inequality, how the focus could be more in social justice and less in the efficiency of the companies and being the implementing the strategy with the lower costs or in making the highest profits, and instead of that, changing the goal. The methods used for economics and business education, again, like these qualitative approaches could provide interesting insights that we can address in our business ideas and in our reflections about how economic works. And regarding humility, is important to recognize that even though economics have a critical importance in our world right now, there are other disciplines, and here we can think about sociology, we can think about social work, about history, about geography, that will be benefit for economics to interact with and to incorporate some of their ideas and their approaches into the economic thinking. Because if we incorporate some of these lines of thought in how we implement business, like the fintech business or the financial business with these type of populations, definitely we can be more successful and we can make a social impact that really lasts across the time. So the proposal here is to incorporate more of these studies and more of these reflections in business and economic education, and also approaching to our local knowledge, because sometimes we kept focused on what is being thought or what is being said by economic scholars in the global north, when we in Colombia and Argentina have amazing scholars and amazing philosophers and amazing educators, and we need to hear more about them or more from them and probably less from the scholars that are located in other places. So with this, the final reflection is, when we are thinking about economic and business education, we need to think about the what are we teaching, the when are we teaching it, and for whom are we teaching that to. So let's get to a Q&A, a short Q&A session, and thank you, Mariano, again.
Thanks, Jose. I will say something in Spanish and then I came back with you. Saben que hoy es el cierre del Congreso y ahora a las 7 en el auditorio Sarmiento vamos a tener la presencia del periodista Maxi Montenegro se las recomiendo si pueden ir. Maxi es justamente un gran periodista económico, está todos los días en el noticiero y tiene muy buena información, así que creo que puede ser muy interesante la charla de hoy, y después hay sanguchitos, masitas y creo que hasta cerveza, así que los esperamos también en el cierre. Y si tienen preguntas, por favor, pueden escribirlas en el chat, o el que quiera hablar también puede abrir el micrófono. About Gota Gota, the internet pages where you can ask for money, they're charging from 200 to 2,000% interest. So it's more than
monthly or
no, annually. But it's a
annually?
lot.
Yeah,
It's
that's
really a lot. But so you know, if your credit score is not good, you have to pay that if you really need money, no?
yeah, and the issue with that is that if you probably don't have credit, and you probably need to go to these shark loans or predatory loans, you at the end you won't be able to get out of that place where you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they don't want you to get out.
Oh no, not them for sure, but there are someone who should be interested in taking people out from that place.
Yes. I want to do another reflection. Financial wealth is not the same as happiness, you know. So you know that I also teach meditation. I think that we need more meditation, and we need to think about finance, because always when we teach finance, we are thinking about how to get rich, and that is not the point.
Exactly.
I think that we need to save money, we need to think about future planification, but the problem is that when you hear people talking about finance, the first things they say is that they want to be rich, and that's a problem. Juan, you want to speak? No?
No, I think
you can ask in Spanish if you want to.
Sí, dale, si quieren podemos pasar a español. Porque lo que te iba a decir en ese sentido, Mariano, es que justamente, claro, uno lo escucha mucho, pero el problema es que es el discurso que prevalece. ¿Sí? Justamente ese es el tema, que ese es el discurso que prevalece, el ser ricos a como de lugar, y en Colombia sabemos bastante de eso, porque justamente la cantidad de negocios negocios ilegales que se han generado bajo esa óptica de hacerse rico a como de lugar, pues es importante. Entonces, es necesario cambiar eso.
Pero dejemos de lado, si querés, los negocios ilegales. La plata no garantiza la felicidad.
Igual.
Hay muchas personas que son multimillonarias y tienen muchísimos problemas, y hay mucha gente que es pobre y vive feliz igualmente. Sí. Lo que digo es que, ya que estamos hablando de cómo enseñar finanzas, de alguna manera el tema es ese, ¿no? ¿Cómo lo encaramos? ¿Cuál es el desafío? Pues somos profesores de finanzas, ¿no?
Exactamente. Exactamente.
I have a question. Do you hear me, Jose?
Yes, Ahmad.
First of all, thank you for your presentation. Amazing presentation. I really enjoyed it so much.
Thank you.
My question is, as you wisely mentioned before, that economy and finance also need to be seen from a social science view, right? So the question is that with social science, confirm your speaking language. I think I have something to deal with first. I need to confirm my speaking language. Do you hear me, Jose?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay. So my question is, we're integrating these two together, which I totally agree with you. There is a lot of misinterpretation definitions in social science, or let's call it, there is a lot of different interpretations. For example, your interpretation of social justice is probably would be completely different of my interpretation of social justice, or another 7 billion or 8 billion population, because we are talking about social science, right? We're not talking about 2 + 2 = 4.
Exactly.
So how we are going to bridge the gap between these two, which, as I said at the beginning, I agree with you, with your statement, because at the end of the day, economy and finances are applied to the societies, and in societies we are dealing with social science. But how we are going to bridge this gap between social science and science like economy, and to avoid such different interpretations? So at the end of the day, to me, we need to compromise from one side. Either we are compromising on definitions of social science, or we are compromising on the principles of economy and finance.
Oh, that's an interesting question, Amjad. And something that is frequently asked when thinking about research in the social sciences is this idea of the truth. Yeah, what is the truth? What is the real truth that we need to pursue? And this is related also with the idea of objective thinking that we need to pursue, and precisely economic sciences are based on this idea of being objective, and as you say, like 2 + 2 = 4, and that doesn't have any discussion. But within social sciences, I think, or what I am learning in my studies, is that there is not such a truth. There is not only one truth. There are different truths, and what we need to establish is more a dialogue than a discussion about what meaning is the real meaning behind our discussion or our terms. So I don't have an answer for your question at the end, but what I could say is that we need to engage in these conversations. We need to include more voices in these conversations, and we need to invite different perspectives into these discussions or into these dialogues to be able to come up with new approaches. Because at the end, what I think that has been said, and what is interesting to me, seeing Angus Deaton saying this, is we need to rethink the approach from economic sciences. And why do we need to do that? Because we have not been able to close the gap between the richest and the poorest. We have been able to generate a system that make equality prevailing, and what we have been able or what we are seeing now is that not only the economic system, but the environment and the society in general is getting to a point of not return, where we definitely need to take new approaches. So I will say, like, let's keep dialoguing, let's keep reaching for agreements, but yeah, we don't have a truth. We all are part of a dialogue, and this is something that will probably never end. But we need to commit with just getting to a better place for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. Interesting, because you are right. There is no single formula that can apply. The problem starts from how we look at it. The problem starts where that we also treat probably social science from a scientific perspective, that we are looking for a one-time solution that can apply for different contexts, which that's not the way that we should look at it. We should be flexible. We should integrate, like you wisely mentioned, we should integrate like continuous improvement and having full inclusion. So we consider all point of view, and probably a solution that was working 50 years ago in a society doesn't work anymore now, and we need to be open to apply new concepts.
Absolutely, yeah. Generalizability is something that we don't look for in social sciences, or at least we shouldn't be looking for. So generalizability is something that we can achieve in nature sciences or in exact sciences, but not in social sciences. In social sciences, we need to just report our findings and engage in the dialogue, and see where it takes us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
No, thank you.
So, thank you everybody. Gracias José, gracias Amjad. Y entonces los veo a la tarde en la presentación de cierre y bueno, como siempre, tanto Amjad como José colaboran con nosotros y seguirán dándonos charlas e ilustrándonos sobre estos temas tan interesantes. Así que quedamos también en contacto, cualquier duda pueden escribirme y cualquiera de los expositores a los que quieran consultar, yo me encargo de derivarles sus consultas y ponerlos en contacto. Como contaron Amjad, José y ayer Slava, vamos a publicar una serie de artículos del Congreso, así que pronto también tendrán novedades al respecto. Nuevamente, thanks Amjad, thanks José, and see you soon next activities.
Thank you so much, Mariano, for facilitating this presentation. Thank you, Jose. Thanks to everybody to participate.
Gracias a todos.